Hey, hello, Colorado landlords, Colorado real estate investors, Colorado tenants and residents. Mark Cunningham at Grace Property Management. So, a very important and very impactful bill has recently passed the Colorado legislature. It's been signed into law by Governor Polis. And what this bill does, amongst other things, is it prohibits landlords from considering applicants' credit scores, in some instances, when they apply to rent your property. This is a big deal. Now, historically, if you're a landlord, you know that the most important tool you have to determine the potential credit worthiness of this individual who wants to live in your house is their credit score. Tell me your credit score before I give you the keys to the front door of my property, because that credit score is going to determine the likelihood of their ability to pay rent. It's a very important tool that landlords have in processing applications and applicants. Well, no longer. In many cases, you as a landlord may no longer even consider or even look at their credit score before you move them in. Now, that's just one part of the bill. It's a very long, very complicated bill. We will link to the bill in this video here. We're not trying to give a full description of the entire bill because there's a lot in it, but we wanted to point out some of the important features that are going to impact you if you're a landlord, or if they're going to impact you if you are a tenant or renter. Now, here's the title of the bill. The title of the bill actually has 2 pages on my screens here. This is how complicated and how much is in the bill. But let me read this just to get a sense of this is the title. Concerning protections for residential tenants and in connection therewith, prohibiting a landlord from considering certain information relating to a prospective tenant's income or rental history, this is still the title, establishing a maximum amount that a landlord can require as a security deposit, I'll tell you what that is, and allowing a tenant to assert as an affirmative defense in an eviction proceeding that a landlord violated anti-discriminatory housing laws. That is a mouthful. If you managed to stay awake for the last 15 seconds, congratulations. There's a lot in this bill. So a couple of the main features are this. Number one, it's going to cap security deposits at a maximum of 2 times the amount of the rent. So historically in Colorado, there was no cap on security deposits. Now, the industry average has always been from 1 to maybe 2.5. It's been around there. So this isn't a huge shift. We certainly don't see a lot of landlords out there charging security deposits in excess of 2 times the monthly rent, but they may no longer, if they wanted to, they couldn't any longer, because now security deposits are capped at a maximum of 2 times the amount of the rent. Number 2, it also caps the maximum income requirement from the applicant at no more than 2 times the amount of the rent. Now, this is a big change, because when an applicant applies to rent our property, we have processed over 30,000 rental applications since we've been in business. We have a very good track record of predicting that applicant's ability and the likelihood of them paying their rent over time, because we've done it literally 30,000 times. And 2 of the most important determining factors are their credit score and how much money they make. Like those 2 things alone, if we know their credit score and they make good income, the likelihood of them paying their rent goes way up. Now, what historically has been done in Colorado is the max or the income we're going to require they make is anywhere from 2, depending on the property, 2 to 3 times the amount. So if a property is renting for $1,000 a month, many times landlords will say, hey, Mr. Tenant, I want to be sure you can pay the rent. I don't want to have to turn around and evict you in a few months. So we're going to have your income be at least 3 times the rent. The rent's $1,000, you need to make $3,000 a month, because if you don't, then I'm not helping you out by renting you this property. You're not going to be able to afford it. I don't want you to move into a property that you can't afford. So I want you to make 3 times the rent. Well, the new law says this: you can only cap it at 2 times the rent. So now if your property is renting for $1,000 a month, you can only require them to make a maximum of 2 times. You can't require any higher than 2 times. That's a big change as well. Number 3, this is what the law says as it relates to the credit score that you can't look at. Landlords may not consider the credit score, lack of credit score, so if they have no credit, you can't consider that, or adverse credit events when processing a subsidized applicant. Now, this is important. This does not apply to everybody. It's only subsidized applicants. Now you say, well, okay, Mark, well, my property is not a Section 8 property. I don't think it's subsidized, so I guess I'm okay. I don't have to worry about this. Well, Not so fast, because what this bill also does is it redefines what the word subsidized means. Here's the new definition of subsidized, and I bet it applies to a lot more landlords than think they do. Subsidized means this now: any portion of a rental payment that is derived from a public or private assistance, grant, or loan program, and that is made by the program directly or indirectly on behalf of a tenant to a landlord. That's a mouthful. That means if they get a loan for their security deposit, could that be a subsidy? The bill isn't clear on security deposits. No one quite knows yet. But if they get a grant, they're subsidized. You can't look at their credit. And it could be public or private. So this is a very, very expanded definition of the word subsidy, and it matters because if they're subsidized, you as a landlord may not even consider their credit score, or as we just saw, lack of credit score, or an adverse credit event when processing that rental application. Now the law goes further on to say in here that the subsidy itself, if they receive a subsidy, the subsidy counts as income. Because you remember we said that you could not require more than 2 times the amount of income in their qualifications, but the subsidy counts as income. Now if you're scratching your head, good, because it is confusing, but real briefly, here's what it means. If the rent on a property is $1,000 a month, and they get subsidy of $800 a month, and they have other income, like they don't make much money, they're below the poverty line, they only make $1,200 a month, they're bringing in $24,000 a year. And you say, gosh, you can't afford to rent this property. Well, you can't say that, because when you qualify them, you have to count the subsidy as income. Income of $800 plus other income of $1,200. $1,200 plus $800 equals $2,000. Guess what? Their rent's only $1,000. They meet the requirement. You may not go beyond that in approving or declining based upon the income category. Hopefully that makes sense. A couple other nuances of the law. It also says this: landlords may not look back beyond 7 years of rental history or credit score on anyone. Subsidized or not, you can't look back more than 7 years. Doesn't matter if they had 25 evictions 8 years ago. You can't consider that. It also says this, that the tenant may assert as an affirmative defense for an eviction proceeding the landlord violated anti-discriminatory housing laws. This doesn't have anything to do with the creditworthiness, but they kind of just threw this in. So what this means is if the tenant doesn't pay rent and you're attempting to evict the tenant for non-payment of rent, a defense in the past was simply, did you pay or did you not pay? Well, now a defense can be, you know what, they discriminated. The tenant can say that landlord discriminated against me, and that's a legitimate defense now in an eviction proceeding. So it kind of makes you scratch your head, but it's what the law says. There are significant financial penalties to this stuff. You don't want to play with these things. The law has built in very, very significant financial penalties for violating these things. Now this is in effect as of August 7th, 2023. This is going to change things very, very significantly because it's changing the bar that has always been set on the ability of landlords to qualify, approve, or decline applicants. The purpose of this bill is to allow more tenants to get approved. The potential downside is this is going to cause tenants to get approved for rental housing who truly can't afford it. This is not just landlords being mean. Landlords don't want to be mean. Landlords want to put tenants into properties who are going to be able to pay, but this is going to reduce a landlord's ability and their most important tool to screen potential applicants. We'll see how this plays out. If you're a client of ours, of Grace Property Management, don't worry. This is what we do for you. We will make sure that we are compliant with this. We are still processing tenants using all the other tools we have at our disposal. Income, we're going to look at that. We're still going to look at verification. That's very, very important now. So you want to make sure that you're still processing your applicants. You just have to process on different criteria. So it's very, very important to make sure you're abiding by the law, making sure that you're processing your applicants fairly in accordance with fair housing. We talked last month about the fact that tenants can now bring you their own reports. You have to accept that. This is a very, very significant change in Colorado. But if you're a client of ours, this is what we do for you. Don't worry. If you're not a client of Grace Property Management, we're happy to be a resource if we can. Jump on our website, rentgrace.com, and I wish you well.